We're glad to have with us today Robert Keefer, PhD, owner and founder of Now Hear This Solutions. Now Hear This Solutions is also a whole sponsor for our golf tournament, so we're glad to have him here today for that reason as well. Prior to starting up Now Hear This, Dr. Keefer was a partner at TCG MedTech, a healthcare business development group in Durham, North Carolina, where he and his partners operated the U.S. subsidiaries of 5 European medical companies and received 9 FDA product clearances. Graduating from Nebraska Medical School 25 plus years ago, and I'm sure he'll be glad to talk about you with the Cornhuskers later, since they're undefeated right now. He has served on the executive teams and boards of a number of successful and growing organizations in the life sciences industry. This includes Quest Diagnostics, Analytical Technologies Incorporated, and Vista Information Solutions. As a consultant, he led the marketing and business development activities for advanced medical products and health services companies. He served on the National Advisory Council of the NIH and led a turnaround of the Hammer Institute, a nonprofit in the Research Triangle Park. So please join me in welcoming Robert Keefer today.
Thank you, Matt. Is this working just fine? Well, thank you so much for having me here. I have to confess a little bit of nervousness here. I'm going to be talking about hearing loss and its impact or effect on certain long-term healthcare issues. And I'm sitting here looking out at the crowd that includes an audiologist over here in Frank Booknight. I'm looking out at the crowd and seeing a couple of our patients, and one man who sang in the choir with me at White Memorial, and then Greg, who sits on the board of the NC Alzheimer's Association. At least that's how we got to know each other. I presume you're still there. So I confess a little bit of nervousness here, especially considering some of the topics. What I'd like to do is get out of the way of the light here first. I've got a couple questions here for you. I'd like you to raise your hand. I've already determined here that Rotarians love to participate. So I'd like you to raise your hand if you know someone, like a friend, a family member, or even yourself, who has lost some hearing. I see no hands down. None. Well, you're not alone. About a third of people over 65 have some form of hearing loss, and 50%, thank you, 50% of people over the age of 80 have hearing loss. Now, and by the way, one of the fastest growing segments in the population with hearing loss happens to be the Generation Yers. Because of the iPods, you know, turning up walking down the street and hearing people, and you swear you can hear their iPods as well as they can because they've got it turned up all the way. Just imagine what that's going to be doing as that population grows older. Second, what's the definition of about the 30-somethings?
Yeah, 30-somethings.
30-somethings. I know I've been wondering about that myself. I was more familiar with the Gen Xers, and I'm very familiar with them. We were worried about that. So, please raise your hand if you knew that a report in the Consumer Reports, an article in the Consumer Reports a few years ago reported that about 90% of people who have hearing aids report that they never seem to work right. Do you have that familiarity with this common belief that hearing aids don't work very well?
I thought it was 100%.
This man is helping me make my case here today. Now I'd like you to raise your hands again if you think, this is a trick question here, if you think that the greatest annoyance of hearing loss is either having to spend a lot of money on them or going through the rest of life always having to say, I think he and I would both agree that the most common joke we hear is when someone finds out what business we're in, they will say, Say that again? What'd you say? Well, if you believe that hearing loss is the most common annoyance of, the big money or having to go through life without being able to understand everyone is the biggest annoyance, I've got some data that's going to shock you here. I titled this, The Looming Crisis in Hearing Healthcare. Over 32 million people in the U.S. have untreated hearing loss. Why? One reason is because they have poor access. As you can imagine, a lot of people don't have the money for hearing aids and don't live in a community where they have good access to hearing care providers. Number two, which I've already talked about, is the upfront costs. And exacerbating that, of course, is that there's little or no insurance coverage. Medicare does not cover the cost of hearing aids. Medicare does cover the cost of the diagnostics. Veterans Administration does have good hearing aid coverage. Some corporate plans and some private insurance plans do cover hearing aids, but in general, very little insurance coverage. Finally, a lot of those 32 million people that have untreated hearing loss do so because out of their own choice. They know that hearing aids, just like all of you, know that hearing aids have a very poor reputation, and there's also that common stigma effect that I think touches us with testosterone more than it does in the female gender. You know, the whole notion of getting hearing aids is just another sign of getting older, and we don't like to wear hearing aids and show it off. Key fact here, hearing loss increases the risk of Alzheimer's and other medical issues by up to 500%. That is not a typo. There is clinical research out. We've given a talk to the board of the NC Alzheimer's Association, and I think that there was a few eyes opened up out there as well. And a lot of doctors, we've educated primary care doctors about this, and most of them will, after our talk, will walk up to us and say, you know, we weren't even trained about these things in medical school. And then they talk about data I'm talking about here was a clinical study that was sponsored by the National Institutes of Health. It's now gone on over 10 years, and with over 1,000 patients in there, and they found that people with hearing loss had up to 500% higher risk of dementia, including Alzheimer's. Up to 300% higher risk of falls with broken bones. And you know what the cost of health care is for someone that has fallen at an elderly age and had broken bone. It's hard to recover, a lot of costs there. And up to 300% higher risk of clinical depression as well. Coupled with that, sorry, go ahead.
Can you help me understand why there would be an association between not able to hear and Alzheimer's?
A common question related to that is which came first, the chicken or the egg? We've now got data out of these same clinical studies. It's conducted by Frank Lynn at Johns Hopkins that have shown that it is actually due to the hearing loss. And generally it's thought that it's just a lack of it's sensory deprivation. There's 20 parts of the brain that are involved in speech, hearing, and communication. And if you're not stimulating that, just like the rest of our body, that if you're not using it, you lose it. Now there has to be more research in that all that area, but that's the hypothesis anyhow. I'm looking at my audiologist. Stand up for a second. This is Dr. Fisher. She's our audiologist, and if at the end of this, I'm sure you're going to have more technical questions that you will have. Feel free to talk to her or to Dawn Gita. Dawn is our patient care coordinator. She's got some materials if you're actually interested in what Now Hear This does and where we are. She's got some materials there. I'm not an audiologist. I went through medical school. I'm not an audiologist. I'm a business guy. I just hope I'm smart enough to start it up the right company at the right time. That's it. So coupled with all of that data is the fact that we have an aging population explosion. 11,000 baby boomers every day turn 65 and will until the age of until 2031. Number 4, long-term, and as Matt can maybe attest to this, the long-term or assisted living care costs for Alzheimer's patients can run about $90,000 per year, not including the medical care, not including the pharmaceuticals. So the big question is, if insurance companies won't cover the costs of good hearing care now, who will pay the expense of caring for future Alzheimer patients under Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance? See why I call this a looming crisis? Is it too much of a stretch to think in those terms? I think we know the answer too. So, a little bit of question we can ask ourselves: how do we go about dealing with this, or cutting off this looming crisis? One way is, of course, to talk to elected representatives and insurance companies and pose them the question. If you wanted to cover the last 6 months, I'll give you 5 seconds to make this decision. Do you want to cover the last 6 months of someone's Alzheimer's care, or would you rather cover their hearing aids now? I think that most of them, I'm sure that if I was CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield, it wouldn't take me 5 seconds to answer that question. The only way we're going to get those policies changed is by upward pressure on our politicians and our insurance companies.
So have they done that study? Have they give some people hearing aids, some people not hearing aids, and seen how much cognitive depression they get?
That's essentially what this clinical research study I was referring to. They compared, they were complicated studies, but it's definitive data as far as clinical research can go, and they know that 500% increase in risk of Alzheimer's is compared to the controls that did not have hearing aids.
So they gave half the group hearing aids, they had half the group not get hearing aids.
Sarah's waving at me. I think she knows a little bit more data. But I don't want to bog down too much on this because I've been given till 1:30 to talk.
Okay. So really quickly, what they did is they compared people with untreated hearing loss versus people with treated hearing loss, like you were saying.
So they didn't do prospective studies. They did retrospective studies.
What they did is they monitored these people, gave them MRIs, and monitored these people over 10 years. So it was a longitudinal study. And
not random.
Yeah, not looking back, going through those years and measuring them every year for those 10 years.
But they didn't take people with some degree of dementia already.
Correct.
Give some of them hearing aids and some of them not.
Yes.
To see how they progressed.
Yes, so what they did is it was people, and it's early onset dementia. So it's early onset dementia, and those patients so what they gleaned from that study is that patients that have treated hearing loss, appropriately treated, not buying hearing aids and keeping them in a box, their risk of dementia goes back to just a normal person with no hearing loss. Versus somebody with untreated hearing loss. And the risk is more severe the more severe the hearing loss is. So that up to 500% is for people that have severe to profound.
Thanks, Sarah. There's actually also been a French study, too, that showed that they could administer hearing aids, treat certain patients with hearing aids, and saw some regression in the Alzheimer's symptoms as well. So, the other thing that we can do, if you were so inclined to get involved in this issue, is become more familiar with the regulatory status of hearing treatment in North Carolina, which is pretty indicative of what it's like in the rest of the states of the United States. In North Carolina licenses 2 kinds of dispensers. One are those people with HIS after their name. You see them in the newspaper, the full-page ads. They're called hearing instrument specialists. They require that to get that certification, if you will, or that qualification, requires a high school diploma, 1 year of on-the-job training, and an exam. Obviously, a lot of them have a lot more education and a lot more experience than that, but that's the minimum requirement required by the state of North Carolina. The other kind of provider that is licensed is a doctor of audiology, and just to give you a sense of that, they have 8 years of graduate training, academic training, including graduate school at a medical school normally, and 2 years of clinical experience before they get out into private practice. Number two, North Carolina does not enforce best practices as determined as research or research-based best practices at the major audiology schools and audiology research programs. What does best practices normally include? Well, I'm going to give you kind of a 3-point summary. There's actually more to it than this, but administering a Medicare-eligible audiological exam to rule out nerve damage, infections, tumors, and other medical issues. Number two, using real ear data to verify hearing aid performance. And number three is administering speech and noise testing and loudness mapping to optimize the hearing aid performance. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this, but you can buy hearing aids off of the internet if you really wanted to. You can buy them at Costco if you want to. The fact is that all hearing aids, most all hearing aids, are made by one of 6 hearing aid manufacturers in the world. The difference between one manufacturer is incremental, and they're always improving on them. Hearing aids can solve over 90% of hearing issues. The remaining 10% require surgery or cochlear implants or something else like that. But just buying a hearing aid and put it in the ear is not sufficient. You have to fine-tune them, taking into account how the ear canal shapes the sound coming out of the hearing aid. For example, this room is shaping the sound of my voice entirely different than it would be in your living room. Entirely different. Well, the same is true of our ear canal. Some ear canals have a large diameter, some have a tight diameter, some of them are this long, some of them are this long, some of them have a geography that goes like this. All of those things shape the sound coming out of the hearing aid. And it's important to put the hearing aid in there and then actually measure the sound that's arriving at the eardrum. And you do that with something called a real ear measurement. A real ear measurement. So, as a result, circling back to our prior showing of hands, less than 25% of hearing aid owners are satisfied for a number of reasons. We have at least one person here that says 0% of people are happy with their hearing aids. For the reasons include they don't work in busy restaurants, it requires frequent revisits and many readjustments, which are frustrating, and sometimes they don't work, the readjustment. There's a belief that people are being overcharged up to $10,000 or $11,000 for a pair of hearing aids that you could probably buy for $6,400 someplace else, including us. A lot of variable guarantee practices. I won't get into that, but there are patients that complain about having been given a guarantee and then having trouble getting service from the same company that gave them the guarantee, which violates the terms of the guarantee. And feeling trapped with locked hearing aids. Let me explain something here. I said earlier that most all hearing aids come from one of these 6 manufacturers. Some of the national dealers what they do is private label these hearing aids, and they tell the manufacturer to lock the software. Lock the software so no one else can adjust them. To me, that traps the patient. I think a lot of us in this room would believe that patients should have the right to go to someplace else if they are not getting adequately serviced. It's a really important characteristic to advise your loved ones and your friends to be sure if they're going to buy from some of those national dealers to ask if they are locked or if you will have or if they will have the flexibility to go to someplace else and get their program. Frank?
It's just like buying a very fine motor car and you want to get service on it beyond just getting an oil change, and you can't get it anywhere except at the manufacturer, and you're locked into that manufacturer at his prices, and you feel like that's not fair either.
Sort of like a cell phone.
And cell phones, same way.
Yeah, cell phone. The last thing is that when I first got in the industry, I learned that there's a term that people use, audiologists, when they talk to their patients. They talk about the hearing aids that are not being used within 6 months of purchase. They're called ITDs. In the drawer. In the drawer.
Bob, if I might make one, and say one further thing.
Yes, Frank.
I happen to be a hearing instrument specialist, so I'm not an audiologist. There is a difference. But the main difference is the care that's given to after you've gotten the person to get the instruments. If you get instruments, don't just get them. Keep going back to the person that you got them from until you have satisfaction, because everybody who fits hearing instruments also has a fitting guarantee with that lasts quite a while. And if you aren't satisfied, hearing instruments are different than most other products. You can return them within a 90-day period. It's not law, it's the customary practice. And use it. Keep going back until you're happy with the product and the feel of it, and they will help you.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks. I've already gone through most of the data in this slide about the long-term health risks of underperforming hearing aids or untreated hearing loss. So I'll just skip to the next slide. Since a lot of you are business people and members of the community, I get a lot of questions about now hear this. Just a couple slides about this. We just simply saw a need for a different kind of hearing provider, one that's staffed by a doctor of audiology. That audiologist will use best practices only, including real ear measurements and our AccuFit technology. You can read about that on our website. We are committed to never, ever selling locked hearing aids. We give money back guarantee of total satisfaction, no questions asked. And we would compete against those national chains and with the huge marketing dollars, the guys with the money to buy those full-page advertisements in the News and Observer 2 to 3 times a week. We will compete with them by acquiring referrals from physicians and our happy patients. How are we doing? We've been in business for less than 5 years now, and we already have about 1,500 patients with 150 referring physicians, and we've proven that our AccuFit system, which was developed in Germany and over the last 25 years, has been now proven. In fact, we can use this technology to reprogram and optimize hearing aids even if they were purchased someplace else, as long as they were not locked. And we're really gratified to be making such a difference in patients' lives. And somehow I wound up at 129.
Having said what I just said a few moments ago, when I closed my practice here, and I had some patients, I looked around for who would I look to service those patients after I had closed the practice. And I chose Bob's practice to turn my records over to, and my own personal hearing instruments and my wife's. And I've been very gratified with the service that I've been given and the way that they were treated. And I can commend his practice to anybody else that will ask.
Well, thank you. Any other questions here, or would you like to tackle each one of us individually? Here's one.
I have a suggestion. Why don't you ask Apple to build a hearing aid with their penchant for building stuff that's so easy to use? Anybody can do it. And maybe even to teach them enough to build iPods that don't cause hearing problems.
Well, they actually, they've teamed up with some hearing aid manufacturers, and they have an iPhone-compatible hearing aid now, too.
And I do think they actually have some patents out on it too, but they've got patents for everything.
But a lot of my problems are human factors, changing batteries and all this kind of stuff. That Apple is really good at designing products that don't irritate you.
Speaking about changing batteries, I find that to be a big pain, too. And she just fitted me with some new Phonak hearing aids that are rechargeable, and I love them. I don't have to put those little batteries in that little battery drawer. I love them. Any other questions?
I say hopefully he will be available for a few minutes afterwards
Sure.
if there are more questions. But we would like to get things wrapped up. Come up here, please. We've got a couple of